a lot of the times in the past, like people like William Lane Craig and people have been focusing so heavily on stage one that it's almost been granted, I would say, or accepted most of all, that there is kind of some sense of causation going back to some sort of necessary causes. And now most of the focus surrounding at least a lot of people being interacting, who may be interacting with these arguments online, might be more kind of challenged by the stage two of cosmological arguments, because they might be thinking, well, okay, yes, it's nice that we've got a necessary first cause, but how are we meant to know that this first cause is God? How may you respond to that? And well, how have people been going around exploring the stage two of cosmological arguments?
So what I generally think is that my views have changed a lot since like I first started like looking at this. Like I don't even know if it's still up, but if you went back to like my channel, one of the first videos I ever did was like how the Big Bang proves that God exists. I'm trying to find it right now as I'm talking, and I used to think that like similar to Craig, like you could do like a Big Bang argument. It could be like time, space, and matter against exist. So the first cause must be timeless, spaceless, and material. Boom, like we got God, just like that. So that's something I used to think that we could do, was kind of like argue for something like showing like it's just been proven that the universe began to exist. What I think more recently now that we have to do is more like a theory based approach. So one of the things I'm very like attracted to like a Swinburnian approach, where what we're doing is really like comparing theories, or like more like an opposite. Well, we're gonna ask like, hey, like we agree that there's something necessary. There is some sort of foundation. Now let's just think about like what this foundation is. I want to say it's God, because I think that God's a very simple theory, and it explains a lot of things. So that's kind of the theory that I would push. And from there, I'm not going to try to like have some sort of like slam dunk like premise argument that proves that God exists, but more like saying, hey, when we're looking at these things, it just looks like what we'd expect if God exists. Um, and then I'd say like, well, what's your theory? And let's just kind of compare theories and see which theory is going to win out. So that's what I would do. Is like a theory based approach in stage two. Looking at things like design or moral knowledge or like intuition or like widespread theistic belief, and say, hey, these things really push like that theism stuff forward. So that's how I generally approach stage two.
What are some kind of objections to stage two cosmological arguments, and what are the other kind of alternatives that people may say if they do want to hold the necessary cause but don't exactly want to hold that the cause is God? What things may they come up with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really the objections are gonna really depend on the kind of argument that you prove. But like generally, when I think of like objections, like stage two being God, it's kind of like that question of like, so what? You got to first cause or something necessary? Like, why on earth think that like it's a God? Like, and that's generally the idea. Like you look at the Kalam, like people will be like, the Kalam doesn't even mention God. And like if you read the first like three premises, it doesn't. Obviously, that like you can get into like further argumentation. Like Craig never ever stops at just like the Kalam. But there's like the bridging that gap where we're gonna have some like, how do we go from there being just something necessary, something being like fundamentally like independent or something, to there being like a God? So that's kind of like the big gap problem, like you could say. Uh, and then obviously, I think that like what people would do to object is just like either one question like, why God? Like why does God have to be this? Or two, like bring their own theories. Like what if it's like like something like a quantum field, or maybe it's just like matter and energy just always existed, or something along these lines. So I think that's kind of like the big like problem, is like looking at like how we're gonna get like God being the first cause, with like all the other kind of like options out there, whether it be like quantum fields or matter energy, or like all other kinds of crazy stuff that I fully can't get my mind wrapped around. So yeah.
Mhm. Perhaps in a response to these objections, what are possible kind of responses that a theist could turn to? Of course, they could turn back to their own hypothesis and say, well, actually, my hypothesis is perhaps more probable than your hypothesis. But apart from that kind of response, are there any other options that a theist could use?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's two ways you could do it. One is you could attack other people's options, or two, you could try to build up your own like kind of
Mhm.
option for what's something necessary. So you could say like, hey, um, matter energy, like that seems super like arbitrary. Like why are there this many like fundamental like particles or something along these lines rather than something else along those lines? So you could attack different approaches, or different options that other people bring out as like, here's a theory to explain everything. So you could attack other people's theories, or you could just really try to like build up the theistic account of things. So you could point to things such as fine tuning and say, hey, when you look at the nature of fine tuning, there's a lot of like things that point towards or seem like they're designed. Uh, sorry, I just burped. Design things require some sort of explanation. When we look at like the fundamental like constants that govern the universe, it seems like there's a bunch of different ways it could have gone wrong, but for the case of like conscious life existing, it went right. It's something that's more expected if the foundation is like maybe something that is intelligent or along these like this like theistic theory. So if that makes sense, Josh, what I would say is like what I would do is try to push a bunch of those reasons like fine tuning or consciousness or theistic belief that kind of like push theism as like this is like the best explanation of things when we're looking at stage two.